Hello, and welcome to the Masters Advisors Financial Foundations webinar series, where we cover a broad range of financial topics, including taxes, investments, risk management, and cash flow planning. Today, we're going to cover cash flow planning. My name is John, and I work as an advisor here on the team at Masters. So first, we're going to talk about assigning jobs to your dollars and why that's so important. So as you can see on the screen, every dollar that you have coming in income and every dollar that you have in assets should be assigned a job to do. Now, these jobs can be relatively simple and likely should be in order to help you maintain your cash flow plan and help others easily understand it should they need to be involved for you. So I've given you examples on the screen. So for income, you want to divide, generally speaking, into broad categories. I've given you some examples, whether that be give, if you want to give away some money, saving and investing for the future, money you need to set aside to cover debt obligations, and spending for everyday spending. For assets, you want to divide the jobs for your assets into shorter-term goals, medium-term goals, and longer-term goals. And we will talk about that in a little bit more detail when we talk about investments. One big thing to keep in mind when you're managing your cash flow is generally you want to automate the jobs as much as you possibly can. So for example, once you decide how much you want to give, you want to ideally set up an automatic transfer where you're setting aside the money you want to give automatically every time you get a paycheck. That way it empowers you to be able to give that money when opportunities arise. For debt payments, you want to, again, make sure that you're paying your debt obligations as they come due, that you're paying your credit cards in full every month. That if you have that done automatically, it'll help you from making a mental error and missing a payment or not paying what you want to be paying. In addition, any saving or investing goals you've set for yourself, you want to fulfill those automatically as much as you possibly can. And again, if you need to cover taxes, you want to make sure that you're setting aside money to cover tax obligations as well. In addition, when it comes to budgeting your money, I've given you some examples of the different categories, but I also want to kind of give you some guidelines on what proportion of your income you could generally look to set aside for each one of the jobs that I've specified before. So if for those that want to be giving money, generally speaking, you could, for example, assign 10% of your income to giving. When it comes to servicing debt, you generally don't want to commit any more than 30% of your take-home income toward servicing debt. That includes mortgages, car loans, things like that. No more than 30% of your take-home income should go towards those things. And you generally want to be setting aside around 15% of your income for savings goals, and that leaves about 45% left over that you can use for everyday spending. Now, a big caveat here is depending on your goals personally and your values, especially the giving categories and the savings categories may be off. But the debt servicing categories, you generally, if you exceed 30% of your take-home income, if more than 30% of your take-home income is going to service debt, it's generally not a very sustainable path to be on. I have given you some examples. If you're just looking to get started with budgeting or cash flow management, there are some examples on the screen of different apps that are available to assist you with that. But again, the examples I have on the screen, YNAB, Mint, EveryDollar, these are just examples. The most important thing is use what works for you. I also want to touch base on a very important foundational financial item, which is an emergency fund. You've likely heard before that everybody should have an emergency fund. You've likely heard the rule of thumb that it should ideally be between 3 and 6 months worth of spending, and that is true for most people, but I do want to give you some helpful considerations to think about for your own personal situation. So why have an emergency fund? Well, life can throw surprises our direction, whether that be an unexpected loss of a job, an illness, a medical bill, or any other large unexpected bill. An emergency fund is there to cover financial emergencies, unexpected financial bills, to help you prevent you from having to go into debt for those things. That's why an emergency fund is so important. Now, regarding factors on how much you want to have set aside in an emergency fund, there are a variety of factors, such as whether one or more people are earning an income in the household, what type of income is being earned, whether it be a self-employed person, someone with variable compensation, such as commissions, or whether it's stable income. In addition, how much of your income in the household is being spent every month. These are all important factors to consider when it comes to how much of an emergency fund you should have. So rule of thumb would be those that are a dual income household that's able to live on one person's income can, generally speaking, may be able to get away with 3 months worth of spending set aside in an emergency fund. However, those that are single income households or the self-employed, those with highly variable compensation or significant spending in relation to their income should likely be considering 6 months, even closer to a year worth of an emergency fund, depending on your own personal situation. Some other big picture items here when it comes to managing cash flow. You generally want to be, if you can, try to think about and plan for major life changes in advance. So an example would be if you know that in the next couple of years you want to buy a larger home, and if you think that it'll cost you an extra $500 a month to buy that home and live there, it is usually a good idea to begin setting aside that extra $500 a month in your budget already to see how it feels. See if you can kind of adjust your budget proactively in advance of major life changes. That's wise. You can get a feel for what that feels like. It's not always going to be possible, but if you can, it is certainly helpful. Another very important item is when it comes to major purchases, major cash flow commitments. I'm talking car purchases, home purchases, things that will require years of debt commitment. You want to make sure that you're thinking through those things. The excitement, the emotional excitement that comes from making those large purchases, it wears off quickly. But quite often the bills associated with those major purchases continue for years. So you want to make sure you're thinking through those things very carefully before executing on them. Again, when it comes to housing, we do recommend keeping housing-related expenses to within 25% of your take-home income. Finally, big picture here when it comes to cash flow is the more you can reduce your spending commitments, the more flexibility it will lend to your budget, and it will enhance your ability to save and invest for the future. Secondly here, next section is on cash flow. I thought it would be helpful to include some guidelines on how to prioritize your cash flow. And this chart does a great job of illustrating that. So think of this chart like a ladder. You start off at the bottom rung and you work your way up. So the foundational item, you notice this has been repeated throughout the presentation thus far. Foundational item is emergency reserves. That is the foundational item. If you do not have an appropriately funded emergency reserve, it's going to create a shaky foundation for the rest of your financial life. So you want to make sure you have an appropriately funded emergency reserve first. Once you've done that, you'll notice the next item up is making sure you're maximizing your employer matching dollars, if that's available to you, for participation in things like retirement plans or health savings accounts. Once you're maximizing your employer matching dollars, you generally then want to focus your energy on paying down higher interest debt, which generally carries an interest rate larger than 6 or 7%. A big example of this would be credit card debt. Once you've got your higher interest debt paid off, then you generally want to begin looking to maximize your ability to save into qualified retirement plans or other type of health savings accounts. Once you are appropriately funding those types of accounts, you can then move on to the higher rungs of the ladder, like other taxable investment funding, things like that. So I hope that's been very helpful with managing cash flow. I hope this has been helpful. This concludes our presentation on cash flow. And again, please stay tuned for our other presentations on taxes, risk management, and investments. Thank you.